Hi, I'm Rachel Abbasi. Welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. As always, thanks for spending time with me.
Hello, happy day. I wanted to talk about justified versus unjustified anger. And I want to talk about it because I've been hearing it for 10 years. And I was like, what does that even mean? You would think I'd look into it by now. I mean, it seems like it's a little self-explanatory, but I wanted to talk through it so that it's no longer this abstract idea in my head and that I actually have a concrete understanding of what it means. I don't get angry very much. I think that I don't let myself get angry. Which I'm sure my psychiatrist would have something to say about that. But like when people irritate me, um, I guess I don't let it get under my skin. My feeling is that I don't have time, energy, more energy than anything else. I don't have the energy to waste on being angry. It's just, it doesn't make any sense to me. I have been angry in the past, like when I was drinking, and it's probably the most uncomfortable feeling that I can experience. I am more comfortable being depressed than I am being angry. So this morning, my meeting was talking about like what do you do with anger? I mean, that's what I was getting from whether that's what the meeting was about, that's what I was thinking about was okay, if I can't escape from my feelings by drinking, what do I do with them? So I did hear about like anger is natural, anger is human, anger is not wrong, but anger can lead us down very unhealthy paths if we don't do something healthy with it. And I thought that just that concept alone is interesting that to recognize that anger is not bad. Anger is not wrong. Anger is a human emotion, but what do I do with it? Like anger is just a feeling, an emotion. I still don't. I think I did an episode on where I talked about feelings versus emotions, and I think that I was like, I don't know. I don't know the difference. But anger is just something that we feel. Resentment is the problem. Resentment is what happens when I hold on to anger. So, what do I do with the anger? And so there are two types of anger. This is what I hear. I'm really just talking through my understanding of justified versus unjustified anger and why why the difference matters, I guess. So justified anger is when people genuinely hurt my feelings. Like I'm treated unfairly. Somebody is mean to me. Somebody has violated my boundaries or I witness injustice. That can make me angry. Um, Anger in a justified way is, I think, um, it is externally informed. Does that make sense? Like it's there has been it's born external from a circumstance outside of me. That's what I think is about justified anger. It is protective of either me or somebody else that's being treated unfairly or unjustly. And I think the justified anger is very motivating to take action. Now, when I get to unjustified anger, I think that it can be motivating to take action too. And I think that's where that pause and stuff is going to come out. But justified anger, when I think about injustice, when I think about being treated unfairly, or somebody hurt me or crossed a boundary with me, it can prompt me to speak up immediately to protect myself or another person. Um, it can prompt me to speak up and set a boundary immediately to protect whoever. It prompts me to make a change immediately. I think justified anger, and this will be something that I'll probably be kind of pensive about, the immediacy of the response, I feel like is acceptable. But justified anger can still make me sick. Like so the big book doesn't, as far as I know, doesn't really talk about whether anger is justified or not. It just talks about what anger does to me. Um, it talks about holding on to it, I guess, and suffering in the long term by that anger building a resentment. Um, it doesn't really talk about whether we're right or wrong. I guess that's justified versus unjustified, whether I'm right or wrong. Something to think about. Um, I guess whether my feelings are right or wrong, because it doesn't matter whether my feelings are right or wrong. It doesn't matter whether it's justified or not justified. Because being right doesn't, like, getting to that point, what do they say? I'd rather be happy than right, something to that effect. Being right doesn't automatically bring about peace. So holding on to it and not creating a boundary, not taking action, I guess, is where justified anger could turn into a resentment. Um, I feel like there's justified anger all the time that turns into lifelong resentments. Think of injustices. I think that there are some injustices, there's some justified anger that it's so big in the world that as one person, we can fight for a cause, but we can't necessarily change the world, So that's what I'm thinking of, like justified lifelong anger. But even in those cases, taking the action but not holding the resentment, I think is important, because that act active active activism, is that the right word, can turn into resentment and confrontation, and instead of bringing about a peaceful movement, I guess is what I'm thinking. Okay, so the trap of unjustified anger. This is interesting because I was like, what is unjustified anger? If I'm angry, feelings aren't facts, but it's real for me. So I was like, when is it possible to be unjustified in your anger? So I looked into this a little bit, and anger that is unjustified isn't necessarily about something that is happening right now in this moment. Unjustified anger can be anger that was born years ago, anger that's rooted in fear, that's rooted in pride, expectations, control, and self-centeredness. So, I talked recently about self-centeredness and how I feel that self-centeredness, although it's not right, can be the result of years of pain. So when I get into a situation where I'm experiencing unjustified anger, for example, someone doesn't appreciate me, you know, to an extent that it's not meeting my expectations for being appreciated, um, or someone disagrees with me. This morning, I heard someone say that their spouse did forgot their birthday. That I feel like that's a really interesting one. I think that that is unjustified anger. I hate if somebody disagrees with me, fine, but I think that if I want to be appreciated for my birthday, it's really my job to just tell them today's my birthday. Remember, today's my birthday. How hard is that to say? But I get it. I remember for years waking up and being like, um, waiting for everybody around me to remember my birthday. I feel like that's not fair. Everybody has their own lives. I think we wish our loved ones would remember. I think it's important for our parents to remember. But other people around us, I don't know. I tend to just say it's my birthday today, no matter who it is. I'll even in the morning say to my husband, "It's my birthday today," and I just say it. Um, so when other people don't behave the way that I expect them to, when life doesn't go according to my secret plan that I haven't told anyone, and other people aren't moving fast enough for my expectations and so on, that's all unjustified. Um, it feels justified because the anger feels just as real as justified, but the source of the anger is wounded pride rather than actual harm physically, emotionally, spiritually, that kind of harm. So what I've learned in my program, which goes back to step 4, really, where we make a list of people that pissed us off and then we look at what our role is. It's a challenging exercise, but it really showed me that a lot of my anger was rooted in um, abandonment, was rooted in expectations. So the inventory helps us look at what happened with a relationship. Why am I angry about it? And what part of me was affected? I think that's the most important part about it for me is what part of me was affected, like my self-esteem, my security, did somebody block my ambitions? Um, the goal of step 4 is to separate what the other person did from what does my ego think about it, and really then turn the spotlight on what can I do? Like, what can I change between my ears to um, dissipate the anger? What do I need to learn from this situation? Um, Recently, I went to church, and the lesson was about the message was about how we grow in adversity and how we can complain in moments of adversity and then wonder why we're not growing. Like, try to avoid all adversities. I don't want anything negative to ever happen to me. And then complain that we're not growing. We need the adversity to grow. So, anger is no different. I need to feel the feelings of anger so that I can learn from them. Um, and, I'm thinking about that right now in the realm of like, I don't get angry very much. I get, and it might be because I don't say that I'm angry. I say that that upsets me. That is really terrible. Like if I'm watching the news or something like that, I don't get angry. I guess, again, I go back to like, I don't have the energy to be angry. But how does this apply to stroke recovery? I like to go, if not briefly, just go into how this might apply to my stroke recovery. And I think that the latest anger that I had been feeling really was correlated with post stroke dealing with doctors and insurance. And I was angry. I was I was all angry at the fact that I had physical limitations, that I had a disability. I was angry that I had so much uncertainty ahead of me post stroke versus pre stroke. It's like I had my whole life planned out. So I was angry at my job loss, um, my abilities loss. I was angry at being constantly in pain in my head. I was angry at the unfairness that I had to leave my job, the unfairness that I have to live every day in pain, that I don't get to go running, I don't get to watch TV, I don't get to do fill in the blank. I was angry about all of that. That is justified. And that's, I think, where I wanted to get to today was, and I didn't know it. I didn't know that's really what is a good place for me to land is when I have been angry. So, okay, so back up. I started off by saying I don't really get angry. I had forgotten. I had forgotten that my disability and my stroke made me angry and sometimes still does. So there we are. So this is good. Um, but I think in the same light, I practice acceptance every day. So instead of trying to escape from the situation with alcohol, what do? Well, I wake up in the morning and I say, oh, yeah, you're uh, a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor with a disability. And I get up. I think that's how I treat my anger today because if I wake up angry, what is that going to do for me? I'm not going to heal, that's for sure, because the physical healing really does depend on where my mindset is. And staying angry isn't going to change the fact that I'm disabled. Um, I can't stay in this mindset of this should have never happened to me, but instead look at this happened, now what? Um, Anger should be temporary. Resentment is anger that has moved in and unpacked its bags. Um, there's the signs of resentments. Like, how do I know how long to hold on to something? How do I know that I'm not, how do I know if I'm being resentful or I'm just still angry? And so I have some signs of how to know that your anger is turning into resentment. So one is that you are replaying conversations in your head. I was just doing that last night when I was going to sleep, which is funny because yesterday I was talking about putting your problems on your nightstand and they'll be there in the morning. Sometimes it's practice, not perfection. So I was replaying conversation. I was replaying conversations in my head last night from, gosh, over 20 years ago. So another sign is imaginary arguments, playing through the conversations and then coming up with alternative endings, which is really bizarre if you think about it. Um, Looking at the past and what happened and replaying alternative endings, what am I possibly hoping to accomplish from that? Hoping that somehow that person will eventually understand my pain. Like, the past is over. What am I trying to resolve by replaying the conversations in my head over and over again? It's fascinating to me. When I get in that mindset where I'm like replaying something from my past in my head, whether it's something that I feel ashamed of or that makes me feel guilty or something that makes me feel angry. Um, and I feel like I'm trapped inside that replay. I sometimes think about how gigantic the universe is and how small a little past conversation is in comparison. So that tends to help me just let it go. I think sometimes I let go of things as an escape alternative. Like, I just think of the universe, and so it minimizes the size of so much for me when I do that. And maybe I do it too much, but and it enters into the realm of avoidance. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. That's probably something to talk to my psychiatrist about. But it's something that I do nonetheless. Nonetheless. So the recovery solution for anger is, from what I have gained from my recovery experience, is to acknowledge that I'm angry. Um, I think that that's something that I don't do, that I try to avoid it at all costs. I'm like, oh, the universe is gigantic. What I'm feeling right now means nothing. And I move on. So I think it's important to acknowledge it honestly, figure out what is the real source of the anger. Is it is it something that was rooted external, like, what is the word? Like, is it something that developed from some external source that crossed a boundary, or was, like I said, injustice or something like that? Or is the real source internally? Is the real source something that I have experienced in my life that has never been resolved? And now every time something similar happens, I'm pissed off. I think that that's important to acknowledge. And I think that's a challenging part of the recovery solution for anger also. So, what can I learn from the anger? Is there a boundary, a new boundary? Is there an amends that is needed? Or do I need to accept that some people, places, and things, do I need to accept that I can't control or change this thing or person? Um, and then learning how to let it go, whether it's using the God box, whether it's visualizing that thought as a bubble and just releasing it into the air, but refusing to build a home around that anger and allowing it to reside between my ears. Um, there's a difference between emotional sobriety and suppression of anger. So, emotional sobriety is not just never feeling uncomfortable or angry or uneasy. Emotional sobriety is feeling the anger, understanding where it's coming from, learning from the anger, and then making a decision to let it go. That's emotional sobriety. Emotional suppression, which I think I suffer from, is pretending that I'm not angry, which is probably why I started out the show by saying I don't really get angry. So that is so interesting to come to that conclusion this morning. But pretending that I'm not angry, stuffing it down to my dark place, and letting it leak out sideways. Like recovery is supposed to help us become more human, not less human. So if I'm trying to suppress my anger, I'm trying to become less human, but I also don't want to become controlled by my anger. I am learning how to control it. Um, I don't need to prove to anyone else whether my anger is justified or unjustified. It just is or it isn't. But all anger deserves examination. Like, the goal at the end is to find peace and serenity. That is the thing that I chase, is that serenity that I started feeling that one day on that run 10 years ago. And I realized this is what serenity feels like when I can be, I can exist, I can be, and nothing is bothering me at the moment. It doesn't mean that I don't have things going on in my life that may be unpleasant, but I don't have things that I don't know how to deal with. I can acknowledge what is hurting me without allowing that thing to own me. I can feel anger without building a life around it, building my behavior around it. So this was an interesting topic for me. I think I realized some stuff about myself. And that's really why I feel like this podcast is super healthy for me and I keep coming back. So I hope you do too. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.